Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome the audience and all of the speakers. After 2 days, 2 very active days of the Net at Work, I would like to thank the Wilfried Martin Center for putting these 2 days together, and the partners, the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, the Politische Akademie in Austria, and also the Hans Seidel Foundation. And this is the last panel of the 2 days. And this is especially in cooperation with the Freedom and Democracy Foundation from Albania. So I also would like to thank our Albanian friends for co-hosting this important event. These 2 days were under the motto Geopolitical Europe, adapting, reshaping, and engaging. I think we are all adapting, and I'm happy that you are all here. You are not a victim of the Zoom fatigue, so that we all can do this still together. I hope we will be energetic, and the speakers and the topic promise a very good afternoon. The topic of this afternoon, of this last panel, panel number 4, is the future of EU enlargement, a new momentum for the Western Balkans. And I would like to focus on the new momentum and where we stand. And where do we stand today? Before I introduce the speakers, I would also use a privilege as moderator to have some introductory questions, maybe, or points to raise what it means, the future of EU enlargement. So, as you all know, as you follow the Western Balkans, Albania and North Macedonia, do we manage to have the first intergovernmental conference still during the German presidency? Can the bilateral relations between Bulgaria and North Macedonia still be fixed? The last hope, I guess, will be the European Council, so we will see. Then Albania, we will have next year, was announced a couple of months ago on the 25th of April, very important elections. But we will hear more on this for sure from Genc Pollo afterwards. And in Macedonia as well, local elections coming up next of October. Serbia, we all witnessed the new government. Can this new government deliver? It's set only to be valid for 2 years. What is the role of the opposition? And is there a window of opportunity for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue in these 2 years? On Kosovo, we all followed the war crimes chambers initiatives. And the big question will be, will the coalition agree and the new parliament agree on the new president, or will we witness snap elections? Bosnia-Herzegovina also, where do we stand? I could say here, after elections is before the elections, because we saw local elections on the 15th of November, but on the 20th of December, we still have polls in Mostar, which are important. And we also see the celebrations upcoming of 25 years of the Dayton Agreement. And last not least, not to miss Montenegro, we had elections end of August. We are all waiting desperately there for a new government. Will it be possible that on the 2nd of December, the Montenegrin parliament will agree and vote? So these are all questions. And the overarching question maybe is, what is the role of the new incoming president, Joe Biden? We all know, following the Western Balkans, that he was engaged already in the area. What can we expect from him? And also, we witnessed the deaths of both religious leaders of the Serbian Orthodox Church. First, Amfiloche, who died in Montenegro, and then the Serbian Patriarch Ilija. So also, we have a new situation. And is this a new momentum for the Western Balkans? This will be the big question. And I would like to introduce the speakers now briefly. And I also would like to mention that we have Vladimír Bilčík as well, but he will join us a little bit later because he's still in another meeting on disinformation. And of course, disinformation in the Western Balkans is also a big topic. We could also take it to here, but this will not be our focus. So it's good to see you. It's good to see Jovana and Genc. So to introduce both of you, you're already here. I start ladies first with Jovana. Jovana is the executive director of the Politikon network based in Montenegro. He was also a counselor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and advisor to the mayor in Budva, very pretty, beautiful city in Montenegro, and also was working for the Minister of Labor. She has her PhD from the University of Belgrade. So thank you, Jovana, for being with us and looking forward hearing your input. Secondly, I would like to introduce my good old friend, Genc Pollo. He was co-founder and first spokesperson of the Albanian Democratic Party. He was also personal advisor to Sali Berisha, then president of Albania, member of the parliament in Albania. He studied in Vienna, at the University of Vienna. This is why he speaks very well German as well. And he was Minister of Innovation. He was also Minister of Education and also once Deputy Prime Minister. So also, Genc, we're very happy to have you here. And Vladimír, I will also introduce him briefly. Vladimír Bilčík, he will join us in a few minutes. Vladimír Bilčík is a good new friend, I would say. Vladimír was elected as member of the European Parliament in 2019 on the Spolu list. He is now very active in the Libe committee, but what is very important that he's the rapporteur on Serbia. So I'm sure he will also tell us more about his draft report, which he just presented on Serbia. And he's the chairman of the European Parliament delegation with Montenegro. So also an expert here in the region. So having said that, having introduced the speakers, I would like to thank you again as audience being here, and you will have the possibility also with the comments function to ask questions, and I will also receive the questions and all works out. So I would like to start first with Genc Pollo to give us a short introduction, impulse statement before we go to Jovana. Please, Genc, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you, Patrick. First, let me wish you, our moderator, a happy birthday. You know, in the era of social networks, it's difficult to keep things hidden. So, herzlichen Glückwunsch, dear Patrick. And thanks to the Martin Center, the Adenauer and Seidel Foundations, the Politische Akademie, and the Freedom and Democracy Foundation in Tirana for having me. Special thanks for putting EU enlargement on the agenda. Last week, a Seidel Stiftung official told the Western Balkans Zoom audience, you have to knock harder on the EU door because possibly no one hears you're knocking. And well, with all issues at hand, from the pandemic to the adoption of recovery budget, that's no surprise, you see. But let me try to envisage some basics which could help frame our discussion. How I think the EU sees its Western Balkans enclave. Well, they need stability, not war or internal strife. They don't like third unfriendly powers encroach too much in the region, and this is perfectly understandable and legitimate. But the EU also officially sees the region as part of Europe, historically and politically. It has promised EU membership 2 decades ago and has spent billions in euro and political capital to help our countries prepare for this goal. As becoming an EU member is an inner transformation process. To a good extent, there are no more classical internal state affairs, especially when it regarded the Copenhagen criteria. Stability of institutions guaranteeing democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and a functioning market economy. Viewed from here, from the Western Balkans, what are the reasons for Albania and other Western Balkan states to strive for EU membership? Was it the sense of belonging to a cultural community that needed to transform into a political one in order to preserve the inner peace, fend off external threats, and play a greater role in the world? I think yes, I could say it for Albania and the Western Balkans in general. Was it the need to benefit from the cohesion funds that helped build some good highways and other nice things elsewhere? I think yes. Many less wealthy members have certainly eyed the EU monies to complement their own revenue, and the Western Balkans cannot be the exception. Was it the need to rapidly modernize state and economy and fulfill the Copenhagen criteria? I think yes, this is a big yes, especially for peoples that suffered under communist regimes. Having a consolidated pluralist democracy, human rights preserved, separation of powers, free media along with market economy. This is what most people in general wanted. And the initial process of EU integration was an actual great help, but coping with the enthusiasm for leaving behind the communist regime at times when democracy seemed to suffer or even serious deviations occurred, the EU, whether alone or with the US, acted, often decisively. At the time, there was a widespread belief that democracy and an order based on liberal values were on the march and the world conquest was a matter of time. Not quite so anymore, I have to say. And in the Western Balkans, there were the so-called two forerunners, Serbia and Montenegro. By all credible reports, there is centralization of power and state capture advanced in Serbia and in the last 5 years, and now there is a parliament composed only of the ruling parties mostly. And Montenegro never changed government through the ballot box until very recently. Even North Macedonia, if you look beyond the bilateral treaties with Greece and with Bulgaria, hopefully the later one is sorted out in the coming weeks and months. A serious problem still persists, and in Kosovo, Kosovo for many reasons remains fragile. The last 7 years in Albania has been the most deleterious for the rule of law and democracy, with the ruling party not being content with state capture and unprecedented grand corruption, but it colluded with the drug lords to get the vote it couldn't otherwise get. And inexplicably, the Commission spoke only of progress, of very good progress during these years. And what looks explicable is that this cover-up strengthened the sense of impunity in the ruling party, so more state capture and more grand corruption ensued. Then enter member states. The German Bundestag, other member states, eventually the European Council imposed conditions on Albania for starting accession talks. Conditions on very basic issues. So Copenhagen criteria again. The new von der Leyen Commission has talked about restoring the credibility of the enlargement process, and the Enlargement Commission is showing that he can call a spade a spade. Also, the European Parliament now, chiefly the EPP group, as I see it, has engaged with a good understanding of the situation, and this is very helpful for the country's real European perspective. But here are a few lessons learned. So first, the EU integration process is no automatic panacea. Even membership, it isn't, as we see. And second, while talking about reforms, we shouldn't lose sight of the fundamentals. Food safety or environmental rules in line with the acquis are relevant. But it is more important to live up to constitutional norms like separation of powers and human rights, and also push for an accountable government. Basically care for the Copenhagen criteria. And the maintenance of the Copenhagen criteria and undertaking of required reforms are the responsibility of the domestic actors like government, opposition, civil society, and free media. Without them, without us, basically, assuming this responsibility, no European dream can come true. Fourth, the EU stance has been criticized for paying more attention to stability rather than to instilling the European values. And the perceived neglect of the Copenhagen criteria creates an image of being in bed with Balkan corruptocrats of the day. And nothing can do more damage, nothing else can do more damage to the European dream in the Western Balkans than this. And final, the EU can be very helpful by calling problems out, and secondly, by cooperating with all actors committed to a positive change. Thank you.
Thank you, Genc, very much. You said the Balkans, maybe you have to knock harder. And today in this event, we also want to knock, but we also want to hear what is behind the door and look at it. You made a nice tour d'horizon about the entire region. I mentioned all the countries. Of course, you focused on Albania and the Copenhagen criteria. So thank you for these introductions and the lessons learned. And you mentioned the two front runners, Montenegro and Serbia. And now I think this is a nice bridge to Jovana And I would like to, I think you're joining us from Podgorica. So, Jovana,
Yes.
thank you again for being with us. And we're looking forward to your introductory comments and impulse statement on the topic of today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to organizers for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be with you today. And to reflect on title of our panel, we are all hoping for a new momentum for the Western Balkans and hope that this democratic change will actually be in all 6 Western Balkan countries, and that this path towards the EU will be easier in that way when actually political will is in place. When it comes to Montenegro is a country which actually held parliamentary elections in August and is in the process of forming the new government, which will be the first government without Democratic Party of Socialist of Milo Đukanović for the first time in 30 years. There is hope for the democracy in Montenegro, and at least now there was public opinion in offered by Ipsos and BIEPAC, and at the moment 80% of people in Montenegro actually believe that the government can be changed through elections, and that was something which was actually impossible, and that there wasn't awareness in the country that actually the government actually can be changed during the elections. So what happened during in August and during the parliamentary elections? As I said, opposition for the first time was able to put all pieces in the puzzle and to defeat DPS for the first time since establishment of the multi-party system in Montenegro. And it was a surprise to many, actually, that such outcome was possible. First of all, because of the institutional advantage which was enjoyed by the DPS so far from the very beginning, and also during the last elections, according to the OSCE and OIDHR reports. The second thing is that so far Đukanović has enjoyed also international support because of his rhetorical commitment to EU and to NATO. As you know, Montenegro is NATO member since 2017, and Montenegro so far has opened all 33 negotiating chapters. And even though it was always highlighted by the European Commission many problems and many issues in the country, Đukanović was, for example, two times keynote speaker in the European Parliament. That was kind of support to him and to his party in Montenegro because of this pro-European course and pro-European rhetorical commitment. And then also Đukanović was seen, and he is still seen as one of the guarantors of the regional stability, and that's something which is really questionable because Montenegro is a country with widespread corruption, with governance through clientelism, with lack of accountability, lack of responsibility at all levels, with lack of transparency, with many issues and problems when it comes to democracy. And the ruling party in Montenegro is connected, or so far ruling party was connected with the criminal clans in the country and abroad, and that's something which for sure is not a sign of regional stability, and somehow Đukanović can be even like source of instability and not stability in the country. So these are all challenges to the rule of law and democracy in the country, and it's up to the new government actually to build democracy, to speed up the European integration process, and actually to build the rule of law and to implement reforms in the country. We are all hoping that the new government will be elected in December and that Montenegro will have an expert government. There will be a few politicians there, at least one, which is head of the URA Civic Party. We will see what will happen with the composition of the government, but many of us are hopeful that the new government will be actually elected in December. What happened during the elections and why such outcome was possible? For the first time, the really polarized and fragmented opposition was able to group into 3 rows, and that's why votes were not spillovered to the ruling DPS. The second thing was also that it was high turnout in the elections, 76%, which actually was beneficial for the opposition for the first time. That then, because of the coronavirus crisis, diaspora was actually wasn't able to vote, and additionally the vote of the diaspora goes to the ruling DPS. And at the end, there was a huge dissatisfaction of citizens because of the situation in the country, because of the poor state of rule of law, economic situation, and everything. There was public opinion poll in March that actually 70% of citizens in Montenegro do not believe that law is equally applied to all. So there were many reasons which influenced such outcome, but I think the most important one was dissatisfaction because of the solutions in the law on freedom of religion, and huge protests organized by Serbian Orthodox Church, but also involvement of the Serbian Orthodox Church on the ground. So this is situation in Montenegro, which is at least there is ground now for democratic consolidation, but lots of depends on the European Union. The first thing is, what should the EU do about Montenegro and about the rest of the Western Balkans? The EU should prevent political decision-making over merit-based decision-making. We are all hoping that the negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia will be opened in December. Then the second thing, that we are still waiting to see what will be the negotiating framework with Albania and North Macedonia, and how this new negotiating framework will be adapted to for Montenegro and for Serbia, which actually accepted the new EU methodology. So we are waiting to see how these 33 chapters will be, how they will fit into new 6 clusters, and how they will be applied to Montenegro, because, as I said, Montenegro so far it opened all 33 chapters, so we are waiting whether all 6 clusters will be opened at once for Montenegro. And third thing is that during the presentation of the month's country reports for the Western Balkans, Commissioner for Neighborhood and for Enlargement said that the new reports are more precise, with clear guidelines and everything, but what is still missing and what was promised with the new EU methodology was that each results and lack of results will be followed by incentives and sanctions from the EU level. And that's something which is really, really important for the Western Balkans, because they are ready, to reform if there is EU membership on the horizon, and they are ready to reform if there are some incentives. And I think that just in pressure can actually move the countries and to move them and to make pressure on them to deliver on reforms and to deliver what was promised in the EU country reports and within benchmarks and guidelines and requirements. And then it's really, really important to see Albania and North Macedonia to negotiate EU membership, and to start negotiations. This is not like it is most important step towards the EU membership, but it is just initial one. And that's something which will be really beneficial for the rest of the Western Balkans. And finally, it's really, really important to link all guidelines and all instruments at the moment which are at the disposal of the European Commission in order to help Western Balkans to build democracy. So there should be clear link between benchmarks, between the priorities in country reports, which are published on annual basis, with non-papers and other instruments which are used so far for the Western Balkans, and clear language there. And it's also important not to support non-democratic elites in the Western Balkans. And when I'm saying that, I'm referring to Serbia, because parliament without opposition cannot be basis for democratization. So that's for now. I'm here for questions.
Thank you very much, Jovana, for this introduction and that you told us about the new momentum in Montenegro. You're reporting from Podgorica, and with your language, we all can see that you are a long time in the subject, talking about benchmarks, non-papers, incentives, new methodology. So we can see you're very deep inside the issue, and we look forward for more discussion. But I see now that our friend Vladimír Bilčík is here. Vlado, thank you for joining. And we agreed to change the order of speakers and to have you last but not least in this first introductory round. And I introduced you also as a Serbia rapporteur in the European Parliament. Maybe you can mention a bit things here. And also as the chairman of the European Parliament Montenegro delegation. So we are very happy that you're here with us. I still hear a sound a bit. I don't know if this is your microphone. Yeah, it's better now. So we are very happy that you join us here, Vladimír. And I would like to ask you for your introductory statement on the topic of today, the future of EU enlargement. Is there a new momentum for the Western Balkans? What can we do? Please.
Thank you very much, and I hope you can hear me and see me. It works well. It's a new platform, and it's always a bit of a challenge and a struggle. And thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a timely moment to discuss the future of the Western Balkans towards or on its way to the European Union, because in terms of the wider perspective and the broader picture, I think we started out this year with some good results and some important expectations when it comes to enlargement. And it's important to underline this. We had an important political discussion at the highest level in years for the first time at the level of the European Council. Following the blockage of the opening accession talks with Skopje and Tirana by especially President Macron last fall, we had a political decision which opened up our work towards the IGC, the Intergovernmental Conference, to use the EU language, the EU speak, which I do hope we can launch relatively soon. And that was an important signal because it enlarged the number of relevant candidates in the region. It created a sense that there is a new dynamic in the region. We've had two countries with whom we have been negotiating, both Montenegro and Serbia, the front runners, but of course in recent years they really have not been running very much. And so this was an important strategic decision for the European future of the Western Balkans. And also it has created a sense of a greater involvement of other countries, greater competition, healthy competition among these countries in terms of how quickly they can run towards the European Union. And that was all very good news. We also agreed on a new methodology, which would make the whole process less bureaucratic, more political, in a sense that it would inject the political momentum into the decision-making, strategic momentum into decision-making. I completely agree with the previous speaker that it's crucial to judge each country based on its performance, on its merits. But I think it's also important to look at enlargement as a political and strategic exercise. We should always have the end game in mind, and the end game is accession. And we need to inject political energy and political capital into making decisions, tough decisions sometimes, both in the region, but also in Brussels and across the member states, which will move us closer to this goal. Because if that goal doesn't come closer, it's difficult to play with the sticks and the carrots in a bureaucratic exercise. So these were important signals at the beginning of the year. Now then we had the pandemic hit all of us. And I think this has affected much of the dynamic on enlargement in the European Union, in the region, And let's be honest, some of the expectations we had early this year have not come to fruition. We've had to focus on immediate help, how European Union could help the Western Balkans face the consequences of the COVID-19 situation. And we had to look at the health situation, socioeconomic situation, and we will be doing much more of this as we see the situation on the ground. When we discuss Montenegro, for instance, the situation is indeed worrying with huge losses of the GDP, and this is going to be a big challenge for the new government, but also for us in the European Union institutions. We are coming to a close of this year, and my hope would be that by the end of the German presidency, we can really have some results on the opening of accession talks with either Skopje or Tirana or both of these countries. So we need some clear commitment from member states. I know there are issues which are still open, particularly the bilateral issues between Bulgaria and North Macedonia. There are also questions related to rule of law issues, electoral reform in Albania, which is ahead of its electoral year. And these are all important questions, but I think we need to all strive to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Let me underline something which I also mentioned, and here I move to my two countries, Serbia and Montenegro, which I also mentioned in my draft report on Serbia, which was presented to my colleagues and made public a few days ago. And I will present it to the European Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee on the 10th of December. I very much underline in that the opening of negotiating chapters are not an end in itself. They are just a beginning of a very, very tough game of negotiations. And what we ultimately need is the closure of chapters. Montenegro has opened all the relevant chapters. It has closed, I believe, only 3 so far. And this is where the running needs to start. Serbia has opened 18 chapters, and it needs to start opening more, but also gradually closing some. And so we need to inject some dynamic into this process. And this is where I think it's important to think a bit out of the box. We've done enlargement in a very bureaucratic way so far over the past decade, and it has worked to a limited degree. So I think it's important that we now start thinking about how we can inject some political vision in this. If we in the European Union say clearly, and Ursula von der Leyen said it in her State of the Union speech, the future of the Western Balkans is in the European Union. It is the European future. We need to commit. We need to commit a lot more, also politically, on the ground in our communication, in our bilateral relations between the member states and the countries in the region. Without that, the game of some tough reforms, which is a game which needs to start, and it is an important exercise for the benefit of the citizens in the region, it will be hard to move it. So this would be my really general set of remarks and messages. And let me turn briefly to Montenegro and Serbia, my two countries. Perhaps I'll start with Montenegro, where we had important elections at the end of August. It's clear from the reports we've seen that these elections were organized well, efficiently, and despite the pandemic, people had their free and democratic say, and they asked for a change, an important change. I think this change was big news across the European Union, and it's important to make sure that it now becomes also good news for the European future of the country. And that means that the government, which I hope will be approved by the parliament, although it will depend on a very small majority in this parliament next month, is going to be a government which will be committed both in words and in deeds towards the European future of the country. I know there is a discussion at the moment going on in terms of the first visit of the new prime minister should be directed to, and I hope it is Brussels, and I hope we really in Brussels have a chance to support the new leadership of Montenegro, because it's important that the democratic mandate is used to the best possible through the best possible means towards the goal of really picking up some momentum when it comes to important reforms and commitments on Montenegro's path to the European Union. I think it's good that now we have a fully functioning parliament in Montenegro, which was subject to boycott by a large part of the opposition in the past. Now that opposition will be taking responsibility for holding power. And I hope that when it comes to European Union reforms, progress and the goal of the accession, there can be a wider understanding across the political forces in the country that these are important and should be above the daily political struggles, and they will require some important majorities also in the parliament. And I hope this is where the political forces across the spectrum could also work together on constitutional reforms, and especially on some of the overdue goals that we have been asking for a number of years now in the Commission's reports. I think the Commission's reports, which were published last month, are a clear guideline what needs to be done. Now, the same goes for my other country in the region. I am the chair of the delegation for relations with Montenegro in the European Parliament, and I look forward very much to working together with Aleksa Bečić, the newly elected speaker, and of course all the members of the Parliament in our next joint SAPC meeting, which I hope will be held in the spring of next year. And in the case of Serbia, my head is that of a standing rapporteur for Serbia, which means that my task is to present a report following the Commission's report on Serbia. I already presented my draft report. We had a good exchange of views on Serbia, following an exchange of views on Montenegro in the European Parliament with Commissioner Varhelyi just a few days ago, last week really, on Thursday actually a week ago. And it was a tough discussion on the situation in Serbia. I always like to look at the tough questions which we face as an opportunity. And this is the way I also approach my report. I think we need to think of opportunities which we have, given the circumstances on the ground, to push for pro-European change. I was very sorry that a part of the opposition decided not to run for elections in Serbia. This continues to be an issue and a problem, and I hope the European Parliament, also through its role as a facilitator in the so-called inter-party dialogue, can help find a solution which will improve conditions for political competition in the country, but also in an important way which will convince the opposition which decided not to run for the parliament that the only way to represent the voters and the people, the only way to make change happen is by participating in political institutions, in elections, in parliament. That is our European way of doing politics, of conducting democracy. And I think we really have to push on this front, and I hope to continue in my efforts also as one of the facilitators on behalf of the European Parliament in this inter-party dialogue next year, and we've already reached out to the new Serbian Parliament in this respect. But I also welcome the fact that the new government, which enjoys, yes, a huge majority in the Parliament, has committed to the European future of the country and to necessary reforms as one of the key strategic priorities. And I think as we discuss my report in the European Parliament, which will be voted on in the Foreign Affairs Committee in February and in the plenary of the Parliament probably in March next year, I very much hope that we can follow some real progress on the ground in Serbia, on the fundamentals, on rule of law issues and reforms, also on the situation with the media, and also on some important structural reforms. The government in Serbia has a limited mandate. It's been announced that we'll have next elections by 2022, so it's important to start also working on improving conditions for political competition that run up to these elections. And I think these are going to be all important steps which will also help determine the pace of accession negotiations, accession talks. I'm also calling in my report for opening accession chapters, negotiating chapters with Serbia as soon as Serbia makes clear commitments followed up with clear steps and reforms. And I think there is a lot that can be done within the next few months. And this is what we all expect. I think that's also the expectation in the Council among the member states. And I think this is something which could help us inject some momentum into this process. The more good news we get from the region, and let me say this has been an election year in the region, in Montenegro, in Serbia, so understandably the political parties focused on campaign, on elections, and there wasn't much space for reforms. But I think both Serbia and Montenegro now have a chance to focus on the real work on the ground, on delivering reforms. And I think it's our responsibility in the European Union to take these commitments, which these countries are making seriously, to really give them the opening for negotiations and give them help, constructive help on some of the tough decisions they have to make. But you know, negotiations are always an important exercise, and it always takes two to tango towards the same goal. And I think as much as we in the European Union need to show clearly that European perspective is on the top of our agenda, and we in the European Parliament are saying this, have been saying this, and will continue to say this. And we've made some important steps also in the Commission and across the member states. We need to see this important commitment also through deeds on the ground in the region. And here, again, I would like to underline that we are ready to support the countries of the Western Balkans in these difficult times throughout the pandemic. We have been the biggest donor to the region, to the countries. We will continue to do this. And I hope this will also be something which is broadly communicated to the public, which, by the way, is strongly pro-European when you look at the public mood in Montenegro. But even in Serbia, the majority of the population wishes to have a European perspective. And I hope it's important, and I would like to underline it's also important that this is picked up and followed up by the political elite, which now has a fresh mandate in both countries. So I'm happy to listen to your questions and perhaps follow up with the discussion on these issues. But as this year started out as a promising year for enlargement, I would like to underline we still have to go. And I do hope we can get some good signals from the German presidency, which will take us perhaps with a sign of optimism into the Portuguese and then the Slovenian presidency next year. We in the European Parliament will be very much engaged, not just through the reports, which will be discussed and presented and voted on all countries in the region in coming months, but also through our engagement, that's my last point here, in the Conference on the Future of Europe. This is a conference which I hope will be launched soon. Again, we should have had it launched in Dubrovnik, in the Western Balkans, by the way, in Croatia. In May this year during Croatian presidency. It didn't happen because of the pandemic, so also our calendar is a bit derailed, but I hope it starts as soon as possible, and next year we'll have a conference which will discuss Europe's future in the run-up to next European elections. And it's important, and again, this is something that I make explicit in my Serbia report. We've made explicit in our parliamentary resolution on this conference already last year, that we engage the representatives from the candidate countries in the Western Balkans in this conference. This will be another important sign that we are serious about the European future of the region, and that European future can only be successful if we have a good, honest, open and engaging dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. Very, very interesting and concise. And we have now 15 minutes. We have to really finish on time in this online format. So I would directly like to go to the questions from the audience. They're using the comments. And we have already 3 questions, and I would like to address them to our speakers. I would like to start with Jovana. Question to you. So one of our viewers or participants is asking, how do you perceive Russia's role in the protests on the law on freedom of religion, together with the Serbian Orthodox Church, the actual turnover in the elections, and the end of Đukanović's era? So the role of Russia would be a question to you. Maybe we start with you. The second question from our audience, I would like to give to Genc. I know the Albanians, and you are a transatlanticist as well. So, of course, this question is coming up. What are the odds for more coordinated cooperation between the United States and the European Union in the Western Balkans under the Biden administration? What has to change on both sides in order to make this cooperation more fruitful than recently? So this is another question. Maybe you can allude a little bit on that, Genc. And we also have on the regional cooperation, Vladimír, regional cooperation. We also observed the mini Schengen, the importance that all the countries of the region work together. And of course, some say mini Schengen is maybe an alternative to the EU, but of course it should not. But the question here, and I would like to address this to Vladimír, regional roaming is a good result of the regional cooperation in the Western Balkans. What are the other concrete projects which are under the way in order to prove willingness and ability to cooperate in the region? What are other initiatives for the youth or where you see a need to work on, and also to show Europeans our commitment? But I would like to start, Jovana, with you, afterwards Genc, and then please keep it short. Maybe we have also time for a second round, and then Vladimír. Please, Jovana.
Well, while the role of the Serbian Orthodox Church was really obvious because of the support from the government of Serbia to the Serbian Orthodox Church in the middle of epidemic and pandemic in Serbia and in Europe in general. And also Serbian Orthodox Church had an active role in the campaign. They supported the Democratic Front. They had a kind of door-to-door campaign. They also organized protests and processions, so let's say in that way. So the role of the Serbian Orthodox Church was really, really active. And that was one of the factors which influenced the outcome of the elections. But when it came to Russia, it was for the first time that such role wasn't obvious and wasn't, let's say, there were no connections with Russia in this case with the law, and just like one of the main opposition blocks, one of the opposition coalitions is pro-Russian and wants connections with Russia, but there was like small involvement in January or February. The Russian bishop from Ukraine, he was participating in the protests, but there wasn't any other news about Russian involvement.
Okay, thank you very much for this short reply. Genc, about the transatlantic relations, what to expect from the Biden and how new Biden administration, and how EU and US can work better together.
Well, in general, it's obvious that with the Biden administration, the cooperation with the EU in the Western Balkans will be closer. I mean, the Trump administration was more unilateral, uncoordinated with Brussels. We saw it the way they were engaged in Kosovo, in the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. This is one thing, but that matters the big issues on the ground. I mean, with the EU embassies here or there, I guess people in the Western Balkans didn't notice that there was a new administration, meaning the Trump administration. I mean, there was the continuum. On the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia, Patrick, you asked me earlier in the day. Of course, it would be very helpful to have Washington, D.C. and Brussels and the chief negotiator, Mr. Lajčák, working hand in hand. Whether it will achieve what needs to be achieved, and the main thing is mutual recognition between both countries, I don't know. It actually requires a major pressure on the more recalcitrant country, which is Serbia. I don't know whether the combined forces of the Biden administration and the EU will achieve that, whether they will invest on that, because it needs strong pressure, and I'm not very optimistic on this. If that will, now that the partition is not anymore on the table, I mean, there is not much of a fantasy created, imagination created solution. So only that could help. But I mean, I don't see for the moment Serbia and the near future Serbia conceding on it. Well, I mean, there, as I mentioned, you have a different world set up with Russia and China being more powerful than they used to be 20 years ago, and they have their line on that. So, I mean, if the EU and the US administration will help sort out practical issues and keep the peace as it is, frozen or not, that would be good. If you have a dream result and reach mutual recognition, then for the better.
Okay, thank you, Genc, for this good, short, concise answer. And also short answer, Vladimír, on the question was roaming is a good example. What else can we offer from the EU side? Show commitment, regional cooperation. Maybe you can come in here a bit.
Thank you very much for that question, and if you allow me, I'll be happy to also spare a couple of sentences on the two other issues, because I think they are important. That's Russia and the transatlantic link. But let me start with the question. Regional cooperation is crucial, and just as 20 years ago, when Central Europe was entering the European Union, regional cooperation, good neighbor relations, and also reconciliation of open issues from the past were crucial to our accession in Central Europe. And we had a number of open issues in the neighborhood, and we managed to really settle a number of these successfully enough to be able to join the European Union. This is the same task which continues to be important in the Western Balkans. And regional cooperation should really be about achieving together a common future, common joint European future of the region. And I think part of it has to be settling the past in a decisive way. So I would also underline we need more reconciliation when it comes to having authentic results from regional cooperation. A number of issues from the past have to be put behind, and the countries have to start on a new platform. I think this is important, particularly at the time when we are approaching the 25th anniversary of the Dayton Agreement. And so in that sense, I would put reconciliation and regional cooperation as two aspects or two sides of the same coin. Now, in terms of the practicalities, the European Commission is already bringing a big offer, and that's the economic and investment package for the Western Balkans, which focuses on regional projects, on connectivity issues. And I think on the one hand, we can think of connectivity issues as, railways, roads, bridges, all of these we need to focus on. But I think we need to also think of ways how we can connect people. We need to invest more in educational initiatives, which are cross-border. And I think this would be very, very important. I think we need a lot more cooperation on Green Deal issues. Green Deal is one of the key issues for the European Commission. And I think European future of the Western Balkans means that the region has to be greener. Getting rid of coal is a huge challenge. And again, cooperating on alternative energy sources is something which cannot be done individually by a single country. So I think we need to think of ways how the regional cooperation brings additional benefits for the people, not just in terms of lower roaming charges, but also in terms of their mobility, there are opportunities to get better education, better jobs, but also to have a cleaner environment. And if I may, very briefly on those two other questions, we've seen throughout this pandemic that the external actors, the external powers, be it Russia, be it China, be it Turkey, be it others, they really take the initiative whenever they can and they take the opportunity to inject their feet in the region. And so I think we need to be really quite strategic in the European Union how we approach also our relations in the region with the partners. I think it's important to say when it comes to Montenegro that the sovereignty, the independence of Montenegro, also the democratic nature and the independence of political institutions are crucial for the European future of the country. And I think this is something which we need to underline in all of our communication. And also, I hope this stays the focus of the future government in the country. And on the transatlantic relations and the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, I think it is good news that we have a change of government in Washington, D.C., because we've seen from the past whenever Brussels and Washington, D.C. have been able to cooperate, to find common ground, to push for a common solution, we've been more successful. So my compatriot Miroslav Lajčák, who is in charge of the dialogue, does not face an easy task. But I think the change of government in Washington, D.C. could be helpful in terms of boosting the dialogue. Let me underline the dialogue is about normalization of relations. And that ultimately means that we create better conditions for the people in and around Kosovo so they can really have a better future and better quality lives and opportunities, because the situation on the ground must change, and it must not change because of some big power game or geopolitical reasons. It must change because the people deserve that change. And if we are serious about the European future of the region, we need to find a lasting solution to the relations between Belgrade and Pristina. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vladimír. And you said good neighborly relations. And we have 3 more minutes and one comment, one question still open. So I read this question, and maybe very briefly to end, maybe Jovana and Genc, you would also comment a bit on this last question. For 3 minutes, a very easy question. Do you believe that the recent tensions between Sofia and Skopje as a result of Bulgaria's veto under parenthesis, will jeopardize the implementation of the Prespa Agreement and fuel stronger nationalist sentiments in those countries and maybe also in the region? So in 3 minutes or 2, we cannot solve this problem, but maybe you can comment 2-3 sentences how you see this the importance of good neighborly relations in this case. And very briefly, maybe Jovana and Genc, you spoke less. Okay, please. Jovana, maybe first.
Just briefly to agree with Mr. Bilčík that it is really important for the new government in Montenegro to keep foreign policy course, and I'm sure that it will be, because the new opposition leaders, they signed already the agreement and they agreed on principles. And that means that the foreign policy of Montenegro has to be fully harmonized with those of the European Union. And that means the same policy towards Russia as it was so far. When it comes to Bulgaria and North Macedonia and bilateral dispute, Bulgaria was really, they insisted that they would not block North Macedonia on their path towards the EU. And when the Prespa agreement was signed, and when everything was going well in the European integration process of North Macedonia, now Bulgaria insists on historical dispute and everything. This is really something which should be overcome within the EU at first place, and then or between North Macedonia and Bulgaria. It is in the heart of the Berlin process that bilateral disputes should be resolved before entering the EU. But as I said, it's really important to have pressure on Bulgaria at this point not to block North Macedonia in the European integration process.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jovana. And last, we already end of our time. We have to hand over to the next. Very briefly, maybe 2-3 sentences against.
Thank you, Patrick. I think Prespa is there to stay. It's not endangered by Skopje or Athens. There are recent developments today and yesterday, as we saw from the media, that an arrangement could be found between Skopje and Sofia, perhaps an annex or something. We don't know. We hope that will be sorted out. If not, I think some mediation, EU, European countries, perhaps US, might be needed before or after the elections in Bulgaria, so that this case that not very many do understand, that came up a bit abruptly, is out of the way. On that note, I think that if that happens, there are chances for Northern Macedonia to have the IGC, perhaps also the date in the best case. And the framework I hear has been adopted, the negotiations framework. For Albania, it's for my country, it's more difficult for the issues I presented, rule of law and electoral reform. We have had complications and very little progress, if not backslide. And realistic people from the Brussels and capitals, I mean, they put the ICG sometime next year.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there still anything, Vlado? One sentence, or all good?
One sentence. I really hope that we find a solution with Bulgaria by the end of this year. As I said, we had some good news on enlargement early this year. I think we need to end the year on a good note, and the best news would be if we can have a green light for opening session talks, at least with Skopje. And I also realize this is an important strategic issue in Sofia, and there is going to be goodwill to find a solution under the helm of the German presidency. So fingers crossed.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all three of you for taking your time on this Thursday afternoon to talk on this important issue, Western Balkans, dear to our heart. Thank you to all of the participants for the active contributions, for the questions. Thank you for the Martin Center and partners, the Freedom and Democracy Foundation in Albania, for putting this panel also together. Thank you for having me. And I would like to hand over now. It is my pleasure for the closing remarks. We have Bettina Rausch, President of the Politische Akademie in Austria, with us, and she will do the wrap-up and closing remarks of the 2 days events. So thank you again for your time, and let's hope for the new momentum and work for it for the Western Balkans. Thank you very much.